Welcome to part one of our investigating the Behavioural Insights Team, a shadowy department that has been experimenting on us by influencing our decisions over a decade.
Yeah, this is something that we've discussed, you and I, about. I feel as if it was before Christmas.
It was a while ago.
We've known about this particular group that we're going to be looking into for a while. I remember exactly when we came across them. 'Cause it was quite difficult research, I thought.
It was the balling. The information initially was very limited. I tried to find out who they were, how they began, and really get ground on them. And then once you kind of hit on the right points, it starts to flow. And it's amazing how this particular group has been mentioned in the mass media as well. But I guess you only focus on the things that you know of, that you are conscious of, hiding in plain sight, right?
Yeah, they do a lot, these sort of people.
Yep, absolutely. Anyway, without further ado, let's make a start on this and let's crack on. So we'll start with who they are, if I've done this right. Okay, who they are is the Behavioural Insights Team. This was allegedly a UK government department. You can see there writing that it is now independent of the UK government. It's very cloak and dagger. If you look just below that massively statement, you'll see that the Behavioural Insights Team, also known as the Nudge Unit, and it's a social purpose company, partly owned by the Cabinet Office, employee and Nesta. As you can see, again, it's partnered by the Cabinet Office, but also independent of the UK government. I find rather amazing.
This was one of the things that was confusing to look into. Trying to nail down exactly who they are. The only information is basically that. There's not much else.
Well, this is obviously the .gov.uk site, and as you can see, that's literally it. There's a few papers and articles, but yeah, information on who they are. As you can see, that was it. That paragraph was it. So, okay, we're going to refer to the team as BIT going forward because it's full to say. Or the nudge, just clarify. The nudgers.
The artful nudgers.
So it says for information, please visit the team's web. Have a look. So this is them, the Behavioural Insights Team, BIT. What do? Well, they apply behavioural to inform policy, improve public service, and deliver results for people and communities. BIT is the original unit. Now, it's interesting, even just that meant deliver positive results for people and communities. Has any government ever delivered anything positive for anyone but themselves?
They never specified what people, in fairness.
That's true.
Obviously, they're referring to our ministers, aides, and bureaucrats.
I wonder which communities they're referring to. Maybe the political community, the media community. Certainly not the average community sitting in our once wonderful land where we had freedoms and liberty.
But the weird and slightly worrying thing about it is they don't just operate in this country.
Oh, no.
They've become global.
They have. But remember, everyone, they're independent from the government. Okay, so who created the Nudge team or the Nudge unit? Let's get into that, shall we? And let's find out exactly what they do, first of all. And then we'll find out who's behind it. And we'll look at some of their links, shall we? Now, this story is from thisismoney.co.uk. The hidden hand pulling your financial strings. But is the secretive government nudge unit manipulating our behaviour a help or sinister? This was published in 2015.
Just the fact that they use manipulating behaviour and help in the same sentence.
That's a nudge in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's quite ingenious. And you'll see this time and time and time again, not just throughout this article, but throughout every article that covers this group. They say one thing, and then in the immediate paragraph, they will say something that contradicts the previous thing. Or they will say one thing, and they will just assume that you also believe it's a good thing, and then they carry on with the article as if it's common sense that it's a good thing. The articles themselves that are writing about the nudge unit are full of nudges.
Yes. And something also to note, if you have the time to take the time really to notice, there will be a constant back and forth here between whether this nudge unit is removing choices or increasing them. We'll see as we go along. So, okay, I'll read the first few paragraphs and then we'll have a discussion about this, because this is absolutely fascinating. Late last November, so this was written in 2015, they're now talking about 2014. 8 million envelopes began dropping through pensioners' letterboxes up and down the country. Inside was nothing unusual, a routine government reminder about the winter fuel allowance of up to £300 to help with energy bills during cold months. Just a quick note about that. You don't actually get the money during the cold months, you get them after. Not exactly helpful, but I suppose it means that if you run up a bill on credit, you can pay it off. Not much help for those paying as they go. Anyway, back to the story. But printed on the envelope was a 20-word message reading, "Many people save up to £200 on their energy bills by switching tariff. Check your energy bill or visit goenergyshopping.co.uk." So far so good, right? It's wonderful.
Yeah, they're just being very helpful people.
These householders were guinea pigs in an enormous psychological experiment run by the government. Unbeknown to them, officials were keeping tabs on the Go Energy shopping website, the official energy switching site, run by regulator Ofgem, and let's not forget, of course, who runs Ofgem. Now, this is very interesting. First of all, let's look at the target group. Pensioners. Vulnerable people, you could conceivably say. Choices. Well, first of all, were this message not present? Would these people have known about this energy site? Answer is probably no.
Certainly not.
Right.
I must admit, I'd never heard of it.
And the nudge here, of course, is, or rather the carrot here, is the money saving. It goes on to say later in this article, which I probably won't read out because it's kind of insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But when you do have vulnerable people or pensioners and you're trying to nudge them or manipulate them, which is a much better word for it, they could make mistakes. They could actually end up worse off than they were before. Mm-hmm. But you've nudged them into making a decision that they previously were unaware they needed to make.
Yeah, and the real problem is they frame these decisions in such a way whereby, in many examples that they give, your choice is actually removed. Their choice becomes the default choice, and you have to take action in order not to go down the path that they set out for you.
Yes.
But that's how they then claim that you still have free choice to do whatever you want, even though they're manipulating the system so you choose what they want you to choose.
Well, we've mentioned this before, but this comes back to fear. They've encouraged those pensioners to think if they don't act on that information immediately, they're going to somehow miss out on something. Mm-hmm. And the fear of wasting money, especially for pensioners, especially in winter, that's a massive manipulation right there. Mm-hmm. The purpose of the exercise was a test by the government's secretive nudge unit of a theory that our behaviour can be manipulated subtly to help us make what it believes are better decisions. It doesn't say for whom.
Well, that is the key as well. There's so many keys in the first couple of paragraphs to this article. First off, the way that it talks about us being guinea pigs, because that is exactly how they're treating us, this nudge unit. They're treating us as an experiment. As we go through the series, we're going to break down a couple of articles where they actually interview people within it, and you're going to see that that is exactly how they treat us. We are just guinea pigs. We're an experiment.
Well, social experiments have always taken place, of course, but they've never quite been so open about what they're doing.
Is that never to this scale? The scale of this is just enormous. I've said on stream a number of times, and I've said to family members for the last 4 or 5 years probably, anyone who drives up and down smart motorways, you'll notice the 50-mile-an-hour speed limits. They happen all the time, seemingly for no reason at all many times. And I've said for a long while, they're testing us. They want to test for compliance. They want to see how many people are actually paying attention to these after a couple of months when the same stretch of motorway, for no reason whatsoever, has a speed limit on it. Like 4 out of 5 times that you go past it. And I'm beginning to wonder if that is something to do with these people. They've conducted over 150 experiments, so they don't call them experiments, but they are experiments. They've conducted an enormous number of these things, but they've only released the results for about 50, I think.
Well, of course, yes, they don't release the results of their failures, do they? Mm-hmm. This is all about positive results, and I guess like any government department, they have to always prove that they need to exist.
Indeed.
So, they're not going to focus on their failures, which is understandable. But there are failures for sure. It goes on to say that many will be deeply unsettled at the persuasive intent of the mass mailing. Who is the government to decide what's best for us and our finances? Now, just coming back to the purpose of this particular experiment. A winter fuel allowance. What is in it for the government to get people to buy into this? They're not benevolent. They really haven't made any effort to appear so. They seem to do the very least they can get away with. This is about control, and this is about compliance. This is about testing people in every way possible, and there are plenty more experiments like this that we'll go into over the series. To see how persuasive their messages can be, how persuasive these nudges can be. And like everything else, is there a line that they won't cross? There's always the hook, isn't there? The bait, rather. The bait is to give you something good, to nudge you, to build trust. The government is building trust with these positive outcome nudges, I would say. Do something we suggest and the outcome is good for you. It's not without its risks, of course. For some people the outcome won't be great. But generally, it's building trust, isn't it?
To be precise, trust in the government.
Yes, sorry.
Which they're now using.
And each time they engage in one of these nudge experiments, they're going to do less and less for you, but they've already created this learned behaviour of trusting the nudge, not even accepting that you, or rather not even identifying that the nudge took place, but accepting nonetheless that when the government contacts you and suggests something, it's usually a good idea to do it. That's the learned behaviour. And this is the thing that is so sinister, really, about this whole thing. This one seems to be exactly what it appears on the surface.
Yeah, benevolent.
But will they all be as benevolent?
That's the problem when you start engaging with these sort of things.
So, let's read on. They call this behavioural economics, and it became prominent enough for a book to be written. In fact, 2 US academics, Cass, I'm going to say Sunstein, never heard it said, and Richard Taylor, wrote the book Nudge, Improving Decisions About Wealth, Health and Happiness in 2008. So based on this, well, we're going to go into the background.
Yeah, the reason that we've highlighted this particular thing is because it does pop up again later on in an interview with the geezer who runs this.
Absolutely. So the authors argue that a few small adjustments to the way something is presented, a simple nudge, can make us choose differently, and a tiny change can have a huge effect. Examples include boosting healthy eating by getting supermarkets to put wholesome food on the middle shelf, since shoppers tend to reach for goods at eye level. Just talking about that, do you remember the good old days when they used to put sweets at the checkouts?
Mm-hmm.
Now that was another nudge, wasn't it?
Yep.
Brightly coloured wrapping is another nudge. Anything to attract the eye to it. Having all your salad and salad vegetables, let's say, at the start of your shopping journey. If anyone's been in an average supermarket, all of your salad and dairy are at the start of your journey around the supermarket. Interestingly, I remember this when the stupid one-way systems were in place. There were loads of people complaining at my local supermarket that the way you had to walk around the store was that you had to pass all the fresh produce first, fruits and vegetables, then the dairy section, then the frozen section, and then all the canned and tinned goods. And people were naturally saying, well, this is stupid because all my frozen food is going to defrost and all my chilled food is going to get warm. But it was the way it was. But it's still an interesting thing that the thing you're most likely to buy is the first thing you pass, or the thing that you should be buying is the first thing you pass. And it's all the rubbish and sweets and cereals and treats at the end, the crisps. Always at the end of your journey. That's another nudge. The government might tell you they want to eat a healthy diet, but they don't make it easy, do they? And let's not fool ourselves that these big supermarkets are not working in conjunction with the government. They certainly did well off of it last year, didn't they? Anyway, back to it. Enrollment into workplace pension is another example. By turning people's natural inertia on its head, workers began to save money for their future by default. Now we can
This one seems...
Go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say that the workplace pension scheme seems to be one that they're very, very, very proud of. It comes up a lot.
It is, and we'll find out later on that there's a specific reason why this one is such a source of pride for them, because they do more than just nudge with this one. This kind of persuasive action, I was going to say pervasive, arguably you could say it's the same thing. This kind of persuasive action is very useful to governments desperate to save money. The traditional way for politicians to change behaviour, not influence it, change it, is to draw up legislation. This can be unpopular and cost millions to implement. If instead policymakers can subtly nudge people into behaving the way they want, it makes changing things a whole lot easier.
This is something, once again, this is a common theme. The way that they believe it is up to the establishment to decide how people should act, and we're the people in the wrong for not acting as they deem fit. Everything this group says and does, I don't even know how to describe it. It just drips with disdain. It's as if it's been written by aliens, or people who really want to be aliens. They just see themselves as something other. They're not members of the public. They're not people. They are the scientists, and we are the plebs going about our daily lives.
Yes, it's almost like we're not worthy. We're not worthy of well, let's take this year as an example. We're not to be trusted to make the right decisions for ourselves. We must be told what the decisions are, or even what the choices are. This illusion of choice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like suddenly, and for no particular reason, we can no longer be trusted to do what's best for us. Because doing what's best for us is not what's right for them, right? I wonder how different things would have been if the government had trusted the entirety of the UK to do what's right with regard to the lockdowns. I think a lot of times people rebel because they don't like being told what to do.
Absolutely, and that's definitely me.
Yeah, and I wonder if they'd not pushed so hard to force people to do certain things, that people wouldn't have naturally come to those conclusions themselves.
It would be really, really interesting to go back and, after this series is done, take a look at the Brexit campaign and see how the government played that.
Would be very interesting indeed. Oh, there were loads of nudges. But yes, that would be very interesting. Maybe that will be another series. Okay.
That would be an awesome series.
It would, because obviously it's a subject very close to our hearts, the sovereignty of our own country. Okay, when the coalition took power in 2010, and of course we know which coalition we're talking about, that was the Lib Dems, Labour and the Conservatives.
There was no Labour.
It was Lib Lab Com, wasn't it, if I recall correctly?
No, it was just Liberals and Conservatives.
Oh, my apologies. So when the coalition took power in 2010, promising to make huge cuts, the Cabinet set up the Behavioural Insights Team. nicknames the Nudge Unit. We've already covered this, but it's in there in the story. Within a matter of months, actually, of the coalition taking power. After 5 years, it claimed to have had huge success and identified £300 million in savings. 5 years. How have they saved so much money in 5 years? So we've been nudged for 5 years instead of them changing legislation. Quite a lot of legislation changed during that period, if I recall correctly.
Oh, yes. Obviously, it has Tony Blair's grubby little fingers all over it as well.
Yeah, Tony Blair.
You really can't get away from the man, can you?
Tony Blair is the rat that keeps on giving. Running the show is David Halpern, who between 2001 and 2007 was the chief analyst in Tony Blair's strategy unit. Tony Blair's strategy, of course, was to destroy the country as quickly as possible before he lost power.
What would be interesting as well, he was the chief analyst. That meant 2001, I'm trying to remember, I should look up the date because this is such an important thing. He would have been the chief analyst when Tony Blair was pushing for the national ID cards.
I think you're correct.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain I should look up the date for that. Because I reference it a lot because it's really important with what's going on at the moment with the COVID passports and things like that.
Yes, we should definitely be doing a comparison of those, don't you worry. Okay, until last year the team was run entirely by government staff, but now a third is owned by its employees. A third by the Cabinet Office, which arguably is government staff, and the remainder by an organisation called Nesta, a charity that says its aim is to fund innovation. How very vague. We will be visiting Nesta again as well.
Basically, this bits team is like a who's who of who you don't want to be.
It's yes, many fingers in many pies, or many heads to the snake, whatever you want to call it. However, the unit does nearly all of its work for the government, which is interesting. But it's completely independent, as you saw from the other page. So yes. As Jordan said, 150 experiments have been carried out in the past 5 years. Bearing in mind, again, this was written in 2015. So since its inception in 2010, 5 years, 150 experiments. I really like the wording that's used in this document. These people are clearly not enamoured of the Nudge unit. And they do call them experiments.
I don't know. I think they kind of are in parts.
Well, let's find out. As well as tackling major public concerns, such as trying to stop pregnant women smoking and boosting army reserves, its staff have sought to see if it can help households save money too. So benevolent. In one task, it was asked by HMRC to help it find ways of cutting unpaid tax. This is interesting. Just these two sentences. Help households save money. Pay your taxes, plebs. Amazing. As part of this, the Nudge unit decided to target those who regularly failed to pay up on time. Staff decided to focus on triggering guilt. Any of this familiar, people? And set up a test involving 100,000 habitually late payers ahead of the end-of-year tax deadline. Do we want to have a little chat about those two words?
I don't know. I'm not sure if they've ever triggered guilt. I can't think of any example where the government has ever triggered guilt in people.
No, not protect the NHS, not you're going to kill grandma.
But the funny thing is, if you read on a little bit more, they go on about the NHS again.
They were all sent texts saying, not paying tax means we all lose out on vital public services like the NHS, roads and schools. I don't know how we'll lose out on roads exactly, because roads have not done particularly well with people paying their taxes. Does anyone live in an area where there are no potholes damaging your tyres and your suspension? If they want to save household monies, maybe fix the roads so we don't have massive bills for our cars. Weeks later, researchers looked again at who had paid up. They found 2/3 of those paying the most tax, 10,000 or so in the test, had paid up on time. That is rather amazing. It looks like we've been saving the NHS for quite a long while. I don't know why we had to be reminded of it last year. Or this. What do you think about the NHS in relation to this subliminal messaging, this guilt?
I think it is one of the cornerstones of it all. Because you can't attack the NHS. If you do, somehow, not only are you anti-British, but you're also anti-poor. Or you're stupid if you are poor.
Oh, does the NHS only service the poor then?
Well, they like to pretend it does.
Exactly. And the British, right?
Well, that as well.
So if it doesn't serve the needs of the British or the poor, then the whole thing is actually a big charade. The NHS is another one of those nudge examples. Whenever this gets discussed with regard to the NHS versus private healthcare, it comes back to that fear factor, doesn't it? Oh, people won't be able to afford private healthcare. In fact, that was one of the arguments coming out of America, wasn't it? A lot of Americans have intervened on the subject of the NHS, saying you don't want private healthcare. We're so envious of the NHS. If you knew that you had to pay into a system, dear American friends, where you couldn't get an appointment, where your contribution was mandatory and there was no way around it, and it was taken at source so you couldn't prevent it.
It's also incredibly expensive.
Well, yes. But basically, British people and others are funding a service that they can't always access when they need to, because it's been opened up to the entire world. But it's not the entire world paying for the service, except the entire world can receive this service. This is healthcare by force, because there is no one in this country that can compete with the NHS. Then of course they get to charge whatever they want. Taxpayer money constantly funds the NHS. And when I say taxpayer money, I'm not just talking about the contributions. I don't know if the NHS has been bailed out. I can't recall.
It was bailed out almost instantly back in the 50s. In recent times, it doesn't get bailed out purely because it just has a direct line to the Bank of England. It needs more money. Just here it is.
It always needs money, doesn't it? It's almost like it's not being run efficiently.
It's always under. This should be another series we do. The times the NHS has been under threat.
Well, that's every winter, isn't it? Again, if anyone takes the time to look, you will be able to find an NHS-related headline that says it's in crisis, and this happens every year without fail.
You found one the other day. It was back in the early 60s. Do you remember that?
I don't, actually.
Maybe it was like a week ago. You found one. You sent it to me. It was just a headline in the Evening Standard or something. Save the NHS. Meanwhile, it was dated in the early 60s.
But this is a regular occurrence. The NHS is always in crisis. And, being told that you need to protect the thing that's supposed to protect you. It's clown world. You're being asked to accept the ridiculous as normal, and on the charade goes.
Talking of accepting the ridiculous, the John Lewis thing, I think, is a prime example of that.
This is one of the worst nudges I've ever seen, and it's interesting. This is one of the least successful ones, or one of the less successful ones. Shoppers at John Lewis were unwitting guinea pigs in another test, this time on behalf of the Department of Energy and Climate Change, because we all know what we think about climate change. The idea was to coax shoppers into buying more energy-efficient combined washing machines and tumble dryers. Over time, these cost less because of lower electricity bills to run them. The problem is that these machines can be as much as £200 or so more expensive than less efficient, should be energy-efficient models. To overcome this, the Nudge Unit decided to print a cost comparison for sales staff to show customers a lifetime of electricity cost. This would typically show how it might cost just £200 in electricity bills to run an energy-efficient tumble dryer over its lifetime, compared with $350 for a less green model. Now, I won't go into why the test had mixed success. It's pretty obvious, but do you want to explain, Jordan, rather than me reading this out?
Basically, because it was too expensive to buy up front, and the only people who could do that are people who have money to burn in the first place.
Exactly. And the overall saving was ridiculous. So to save £150 in fuel bills, you have to actually be out of pocket £200.
And it also depends on how long it lives.
Of course, nothing
not
is
live
made to
all that long.
last. There's also this idea of when you combine two machines into one, I would say there's a higher likelihood that it won't be great at either of those jobs, because it's not designed to do one thing. So yes. Anyway, the test had mixed success for the reasons that we've given. The dramatic cost difference between the machines, yes, in trying to encourage people to buy a machine that isn't actually going to save them money at all. That's an amazing game, but it wasn't very popular because people could see through it. So yes, the team also managed to extract charity donations from banking staff by plying them with sweets. This one's incredible.
Oh, this one is absolutely remarkable.
So they found charity. Oh, go on.
So I would just like to say as well, when it comes to these bits team, another, I suppose it's partly because what they do, because they're psychologists. They have a very easy out. Whenever something goes wrong for them, they blame everyone else. As we've just seen with the washing machine thing, researchers guess the lack of take-up was because of the dramatic cost difference. Basically, we couldn't do anything. It's not on us. Somebody else who's done it.
Plus, there's no data. Why are they guessing? Why didn't they ask people why they didn't buy them?
Because their argument there would be they couldn't ask them because that would then fiddle around with the results.
Oh, but wait. Is it because they're behaving in this kind of sinister, sly way and they can't openly explain what they've done?
Maybe.
They wouldn't want Joe Public to find out they'd been manipulated, right?
Government would never manipulate you. Ever.
No.
Leave them alone. They're just trying to help us, it's Boris.
Help us do what? That's the question. Okay, anyway, so they managed to find charities hoping to persuade people to donate a day's wages. And they did well when potential donors were sent a bag of sweets and a personalised email from their boss. Bearing in mind what the sweets and the email cost to send, maybe in total a fair bit of money, maybe, I don't know, £100, but individually each person gained what, £2-3 worth of sweets. The email cost nothing except time. Such tactics had a better impact on donation rates than a visit from a celebrity or one-on-one chat with a volunteer. Now, the interesting thing here is that people have essentially traded in a couple of pounds worth of sweets for a day's pay. And nobody asked the owners of these companies, the CEOs, the directors to do this, just the workers, just the banking staff. Again, you know, you've got to look at not so much the experiment itself, but why they target the people they target. Because we are literally just there to prop up a system. Everything we have is there for the taking. Just 7% of workers made a donation after their brush with minor stardom. By contrast, nearly 1 in 5 did so after receiving the sweets. The email and sweets, which aim to bring on reciprocity, which I've mentioned before, they call it a response to friendly actions, is actually a kind of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing, or a pay it forward type time investment. Well, the most powerful intervention, says Michael Sanders, the unit's head of research for education and charitable giving. Again, why weren't the banks targeted for a day's profit, as you said earlier, Jordan, or maybe someone give up their bonus, a day's worth of bonus? I'm sure that would have made a much larger contribution than even the entire staff in one branch.
But then they wouldn't have had all that tasty data.
Well, that's true. Because again, it's the money is the bait, but the real thing is the control, the conformity. Mm-hmm. What will it take for you to, or to buy you, I suppose? What would it take to buy you? What would it take for you to be manipulated, and think about how often this happens? How much easier does it become each time you fall for this? This is really about data gathering. This is about working out which manipulations work on the public, which ones need an additional push or a nudge, if you will, and which ones just work first time out.
That's why they started with small things.
Small things that are beneficial.
Machine, not that one. Invest in this like pension scheme. Donate to this charity. They've started off with very small things which are benevolent.
Yeah.
Slowly, it's going to start ramping up. And don't worry, we will be doing an episode on what they're doing at the moment.
Oh, yes. Yes, we're kind of almost tempted to rush towards that one. But it's
slowly.
It's really important, though, that you get the background, because we want to get you to the point where you can recognise this when it's actually happening. Okay. So, do we want to talk about the pensions as well?
If we can, but the one thing that I definitely want to bring up is the pension passport.
Okay. So pensions are a new target for the unit for years. Those approaching retirement have been baffled by acres of jargon-packed paperwork sent by pension companies. This confusion meant many struggled to work out how much they'd put aside for retirement or to know what to do next. These decisions have become even more mind-boggling after the launch of the new pension freedoms. Now the Nudge Unit team is examining how simplifying savers' details on a single sheet of paper known as a pensions passport should help make things easier. That word passport is so loaded.
Yep.
I don't really know what to say about this.
I don't know, but the pensions passport thing I think is important to bring up, because you've also got another sort of passport at the moment as well.
Yes.
And I've never heard of the pension passport before, but this was back in 2015. I'd be interested to find out how many other passports they've launched.
Well, even if they've only named them passports in their jargon, I bet lots exist.
Yes, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. Just in their jargon, in their language, how many other passports have we suddenly developed?
And that use of language, simplified details on a single sheet of paper known as a pensions passport, is that not pretty much what they're doing with your medical information now?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we're treated like mice in a laboratory. These people are really quite salty about this, and yet they also seem to be, well, contradictory, as Jordan says. While many millions of people have taken part in the experiments, very few have any idea they've done so, and this is really the crux of it.
Mm-hmm.
Some worry that this shadowy organisation is being allowed to exercise such control. Last year, a panel of peers in the House of Lords demanding the unit come clean about failures as well as successes. Claire Fox, director of the Institute of Ideas, which campaigns for free speech and debate, says nudge theory is about denying certain choices or making other choices harder. And you can see that backed up in the earlier segment here, where they were talking about the guilt, using guilt as a manipulator.
Mm-hmm.
That certainly does make choices harder. Or rather, it leaves only one choice that you can follow with a clear conscience. She goes on to say it used to avoid having arguments, and instead to manipulate. It is used, right, let me start that sentence again. It is used to avoid having arguments and instead to manipulate people without them realising. It is a real assault on people's capacity to make up their own minds. And she's correct, and we said this earlier. You're not trusted to make the right decision now. There is no more debate, there is no more discussion. It's just they don't trust us, so they're going to manipulate us into making the right decision instead of even putting the options on the table and letting you make a clear choice with clarity, without manipulation. It treats us like mice in a laboratory. If people don't do something, it's not because they're incapable of doing it, it's because they have chosen not to. However, Owain Service, managing director of the Behavioural Insights Team, says, "We do not constrain people's choices. In fact, most of our interventions enhance choice by enabling people to make better choices for themselves." Enhance choice. When you enhance a choice, you are actually creating bias. If you're enhancing choices, you are adding more choices, plural. But to enhance choice, singular, means that you are favouring one choice over another. So, by definition, he is stating that they are manipulating and influencing. Nudge unit bosses argue it has identified 300 million of savings for the government over the past 5 years, and many of its experiments have had a positive impact for the nation.
Could we just go back to that previous statement?
Okay.
From Mr. Service. That's what I said earlier on about the way these people talk about you and the way these people frame their answers. It is very much that they know what's best and you're just some helpless buffoon. You know, you have the freedom to choose whatever you want, but if you don't choose the one that we put in front of you, you're stupid. Exactly.
Yeah.
This article didn't mention, I just had a quick read through. When it comes to the pensions, they did this, but they were also the people behind the automatic enrolment. That's taking away people's choice, because the way the automatic enrolment works is you're in it by default. You then have to say, no, I don't want to be in this. And while that may not sound like they're taking choice away, in many ways it is, because they understand that people are kind of lazy and they will go with inertia.
And forgetful, you know, if you're stressed or busy.
Yeah.
You know,
we've all done it. How many of us have kept a bill on for no apparent bloody reason and then 3-4 months later finally remembered or got around to cancelling the standing order?
Well, look at gymnasium memberships as a good example.
Mm-hmm.
How many people join a gym? Life takes over, commitments, time. Maybe you get overtime, maybe you change jobs, maybe your shift changes, for whatever reason, you stop using it. Maybe you find a better way. Maybe you exchange the gym for jogging or running or something else you can do at home, swimming, anything. So for whatever reason, you stop using it. How many people carry on paying that monthly fee?
Loads of people.
Because they keep saying, I'll definitely go next week, right? So you keep paying, you keep not using it, and they keep collecting your money. Mm-hmm. And as Jordan said, when you sign up to something, and the default is that you've signed up to it, you've now got to actually make an effort, use energy to sign off it, to remove yourself from it. So it's far easier for them to add you to things by default, and then you either have to take action to remove yourself, or you just remain there. And they've done this with organ donations as well, mm-hmm. Which is another one. This is I can't think what's the wording for it. I can't think.
I'm not sure what word you want.
When you are default a donor.
Auto donor?
That's not the word I'm thinking of. It will come to me. But they've done it with organ donation anyway. So now everyone is a donor, unless you opt out. And this is exactly the same thing. I'll quickly go through this. Mm-hmm. Now, before they did this, again, this is an older document, one of the trials managed to add 100,000 sign-ups to the organ donor register by encouraging people to join when they bought their car tax. This is another massive manipulation. The government has no right to impose these choices on you. Organ donation is a very, very private and personal decision for each of us to make. This is manipulation. This is coercion. And I'm sure, I haven't seen the advert myself, but I'm sure it comes with the standard emotional manipulation, the guilt. You know, the same way that they've done with the Save the NHS by paying your taxes on time. I think how many lives you could save. Isn't it a bit selfish not to donate your organs?
The thing that's interesting is here they didn't state whether it was on by default. I have a sneaky feeling it would have been.
No,
because that seems to be how everything else they did.
Well, 2015, it wasn't default, was it? It wasn't a
No, no,
default
no, no, no,
opt-in.
no, 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 no. They're talking about when you buy it via the website when you buy your car tax. Then there could have been a little tick box that was automatically checked.
Possibly. Oh, I see what you mean. Yes,
Yeah,
quite possible.
that's what I meant. Sorry, not that it was automatic. Later on, it was brought in, so it was automatic. I think it was 2018, so a couple of years later. This is another thing as well that they do. They seem to start off with a soft little nudge, like this, like with the car tax, and then a couple of years later, it becomes mandated. It becomes
Yes.
law. We've seen exactly the same with the pensions as well. The pensions is a great example of that, actually, because it started off with the just a soft nudge to get people involved in it, and then they made it mandatory. I think they made that legal in 2015-ish.
I remember the adverts for the pension. Do you remember? It was
Yeah, the advert was weird.
it was saturated all over
Yeah.
media. The pension
advert.
scheme. Didn't they have some weird character?
Yeah, it was like a weird, big, fluffy thing.
Like the honey monster.
Yeah, man, it was like the psychedelic honey monster.
Okay, so just to finish up with this article, questions are also being raised about who is responsible if a nudge goes wrong or how to prove its claims. What if a household switching energy supplier ends up with a worse deal? Mr. Service, what a name, argues that even though you have been nudged into making a choice, it is still one you've made and must take responsibility for. I'm calling rubbish on that because you have been given a sense of urgency to make a decision that you haven't planned for. And therefore, I don't think you should be held responsible. Or rather, if you've been coerced, if you've been given an idea that there is a time limit in which to make that decision, and then you are pressured into making that decision without giving it sufficient thought, I would argue that they are in fact responsible for that. But what do you think?
That just sums up their overall attitude.
Yeah, you're responsible.
I've said it a number of times now. The attitude is, you're the lab rat, it's entirely on you, but we're going to do things, we're going to put stuff in your path whereby you're going to take the option we want you to take.
So
And if it doesn't go wrong, well, you didn't have to take that option, you could have took a different one.
Right. So if it's a success, we'll take the credit, and if it's a failure, that was your fault.
Exactly.
Amazing.
It's like dealing with children.
Mr. Service goes on to say, nudges do not restrict choice. There's no way that you can say that that's true because you'll be nudged in a particular direction. We are in favour of enabling people to make better decisions for themselves. Well, then why don't you give them the freedom to do so and stop manipulating them? Our model is to start small, we bet, and find out what works so we can help public services identify better ways of doing things. This means public services end up doing more of the things that work and fewer of the things that do not. There's a nice little bit there at the end in which they come across as this benevolent, helpful, like a landowner dealing with the serfs, with the tenant farmers. Oh, this is all for your benefit. No, you don't need to thank us. We're too busy thanking ourselves.
You don't understand. The reason we're having to put taxes up is so you get more free services.
Yes.
You don't understand, peasant. The reason we're taking more of your grain is so you can have more bread. Like, that's what these people are like.
The government is pledging to fund these services for you. But
It's free services. Why wouldn't you want free service? Just make the choice that we put in front of you. Your life will be better if you do what we want you to do.
But it's our money. No, it's the government's funding this. So shush, little boy. It's really quite ridiculous. The manipulation is so overt. That said, we have found loads of examples of this where we've sat there and gone, wow. Yeah, I remember that. That happened. So there you go. Right.
Their fingers are on a lot of things at the moment.
Yes.
It's actually remarkable to have come across these people.
Oh yes, this is Hydra in action. As this series continues, you will find it likely that you have already been unwitting participants in these experiments, and we hope this series will arm you with the ability to resist them in the future. Please join us for part 2, and we'll see you then.